Hello, my little men and guzzlers. My name is Ryan, and welcome to the Noob Report Episode 1. Today we're going to be talking about Saskia the Unyielding, which is really my first Magic deck. I started playing the game a couple years ago, and I was the only person in my group who had an all but blue deck. My meta was really fast, I was getting countered left and right, but I stole a few games off of sheer aggro. So let's start by reading her effect. So she's Doom Brood. As I said, that means all but blue. Has Vigilance and Haste. As Saskia the Unyielding enters the battlefield, choose a player. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. Great, simple effect. When I first got a hold of Saskia, what I was doing was casting it, and let's say that I chose player A to be the target of my aggro, because I play commander, so obviously on average I have pods that are about maybe 4 people. I'd grab on to player A and try to kill them, and designate player B for Saskia's effect, so that way I'd simultaneously kill 2 people. Aggro has an inherent issue with the player not winning because, one, you're targeting one person. Even with this cool effect, 2 people, there's still a third person who you're not targeting. But 2, you're also exhausting a lot of resources. Usually when there's an aggro player at the table, maybe they're not the first one out unless they're hated off the table, but they kill one person, and then the people who weren't being targeted are usually the ones to win. And just so you know, anything Saskia or aggro related tends to get hated off the table. When you put something out and you're swinging, people are very akin that's a little too fuzzy. They're really keen to getting you off the table ASAP so they can combo and play Magic. With Saskia, however, it's even worse because you trying to kill these 2 people simultaneously and leaving the third person out, everyone's going to try to band against you. So my version of Saskia today is going to focus on the power of Helm of the Host. So I want to read that effect as well. It's a legendary artifact equipment, 4 to cast, 5 to equip. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature. Except the token isn't legendary. If equipped creature is legendary, that token gains haste. Instantly, we fix Saskia's issue. We're able to point at one person with the effect, grab a hold of player A, wear him out, and simultaneously kill this other person, and then generate a token so that the third person's not left out of all the carnage. Oh, it's perfect. It's so sumptuous. In fact, we want to get into this card like ASAP. So there are 2 tutors that I'm going to bring to your attention. And mind you, because of this color identity, there are going to be quite a few tutors that we talk about before the end of this. But these 2 in particular are very cheap, money-wise and mana-wise. Open the Armory is the first one. It costs 1 and a white. It's a sorcery that says search your library for an aura or an equipment card, reveal it and put it into your hand, shuffle up. Steel Shaper's Gift is 1 white sorcery. Search your library for an equipment card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, shuffle up. Great. We can get Helm of the Host, and we're also going to include a really powerful equipment. We're going to put in some big, great equipments. So that way we can not just search for Helm of the Host, but other things that are really going to mess our opponents up. Before we get there, though, there is another equipment tutor that we need to talk about. Her name is Stoneforge Mystic. She costs 1 colorless and 1 white. She is kind of expensive money-wise. I think she's about $20 or $30. It's really because in addition to her tutoring out an equipment for 1, a white, and turning her sideways, you may put an equipment card from your hand onto the battlefield. So you can take really large equipments and just cheat them onto the field. So, of course, she is very valuable. In order for this deck to be as effective as possible, I would say it is a great idea to get her. a lot of the trends that you'll see in the type of creatures I like to pick, they tutor out something, they bring some major value, but they're bodies. If you can get a creature to do what maybe a non-permanent could do, it plays into the aggro strategy because they come in, they give you value, and then they're able to actually be part of that combat. They're able to actually attack. That's why when, tutoring out Stoneforge Mystic, I'd even go as far to say we should run creature-based tutors that are creatures themselves, like Imperial Recruiter. It's 2 and a red. It says, when Imperial Recruiter enters the battlefield, search your library for a creature card with power 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle up. Excellent. You get to tutor out Stoneforge Mystic, or some of the other creatures we're going to talk about in a minute, and it stays there, so it can be part of the battle if need be. Very effective. However, it is expensive, just like Stoneforge Mystic is. It was reprinted rather recently, so you can get it for maybe about $20 or $30, but there is a cheaper alternative named Recruiter of the Guard that costs 2 and a white. When Recruiter of the Guard enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle up. Excellent. It satisfies the same purpose and for a lot less money. But to be honest, for redundancy's sake, I would say run both if you can. There are 2 creatures that I think they're not part of your combo. They're not necessarily the core of your deck, but they give you an example of the type of creatures you could also get through any of your creature tutors. The first one is called Ankle Shanker. What's funny about this card is that it actually came out in Saskia's original build, the Commander 2016 build. It requires 2 colorless, a red, a white, and a black. It has haste. When Ankle Shanker attacks, creatures you control gain first strike and death touch until the end of the turn, and it's a 2/2. So either of those creature tutors we discussed can actually fetch them out. And it functions almost as a creature-based board wipe in combat. It comes out, and because the first strike is administering death touch, before blockers can attack back, you're wiping out anything that comes across your army. It's very effective. Even in the pods that I play in that they don't tend to do a lot of combat, it just puts a lot of pressure on board. The second creature is a staple in EDH, Serra Ascendant. For just that 1 white, yeah, it starts off as a 1/1 life linker, but in multiplayer, we're starting out at 40 life. So in the early game, it's coming out and it has +5/+5, and it's in the air. And to be honest, there have been games that Serra Ascendant has brought me to 50 or 60 life. And if you're playing a really tight game, even later in the match, you're able to get a lot of value off of Serra Ascendant. Okay, but we're here to win. So aside from the flavorful options that these tutors can grab, let's talk about an option that it can fetch that can potentially end the game if it interacts with Helm of the Host. It's called Combat Celebrant. It's a 3-drop, 2 and a red. If Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. What would happen is, and mind you, it doesn't have haste, so that is one unfortunate downside. But if you get around it, whether you give it haste or wait to the next turn, whatever creative option you choose, when Helm of the Host is on this thing, it's actually going to just continue to create copies, so you could just swing out into infinity and corner off the game. Effective, and it's a 2-card combo. Now, there's another creature I want to talk about. It's better with Helm of the Host for the same effect, but it can't be tutored through Imperial Recruiter or Recruiter of the Guard, unfortunately. Her name is Aurelia the War Leader, and trust me, later in this video, you'll see other really consistent ways to fetch her out. She requires 2 red, and 2 white, flying, vigilance, and haste. When Aurelia the War Leader attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So the weakness that Combat Celebrant had of actually having to wait to attack or getting haste on it, she circumvents all of that. she comes in, she's ready to attack. She has the vigilance. She has flying. If you get Helm of the Host on her, I mean, she's in the air and she's ready to attack, like, in the game. Just call it game at that point. It's a very great interaction. So now let's get into Sunforger, which is our second equipment that we're going to talk about. So you have many different ways to fetch out equipments, and this one is very special in that it can help you fetch out other cards. So by you tutoring out a Sunforger, you're bringing out the Sunforger package, as people call it. Let's start with the effect. It is a 3-drop artifact equipment. It costs 3 to equip as well. Equipped creature gets a +4/+0. You can pay a white and a red. Unattached Sunforger. Search your library for a red or white instant card with CMC 4 or less, and cast that card without paying its mana cost. Mana cost. We're going to get into why that's an important distinction in a minute. So let's get into this Sunforger package. The first thing I definitely say you need to run is Enlightened Tutor. For 1 white and an instant speed rather, you can search your library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, shuffle up, put the card on top of it. Grab one of your many different equipments, or fetch out some of the enchantments that we'll talk about later. Well, there's only one enchantment, but we'll get there. You can also get El Domri's Call, I think it's pronounced. It requires a green and a white, and it's also an instant. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, shuffle up. Excellent. You can actually get something like Aurelia, for example. And even though it requires a green in addition to its white cost, it's still treated as a viable target for Sunforger. So you're able to unequip, tutor out a creature, send it right into your hand. And there are going to be some really great options for that. Next we have Swords to Plowshares, or Path to Exile, whichever you prefer, which are general EDH staples. Excellent to come out through Sunforger. You also have Utter End, or Anguish Unmaking. Basically, you get to just exile a target non-land permanent. Perfect. You also have Chaos Warp. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, put it out into the battlefield. Yeah, they can rifle through and get something out, but being strategic in what you hit and when you hit with Chaos Warp, it is a game-ending strike. You can hit anything, any target permanent. And for that to climb out of a Sunforger suddenly is absolutely effective. Now let's jump into a little bit of artifact and enchantment hatred. Now you have a lot of options for this color identity. Even for coming out of Sunforger, the one I personally want to talk about is Wear and Tear. Doesn't cost much money. The wear side of it is 1 and a red to kill an artifact. The tear side just costs white, and then you can hit an enchantment. You can fuse and pay both and then do both. I think it's pretty cool. Next, the counters that you should be running in this color identity. Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. You can run both, either or, but I highly think it is I highly suggest it. I think it's really effective. So, you can choose one. You can counter a target blue spell, destroy a target blue permanent. And it can be multicolored targets, as long as there's blue in the identity. The first thing, I haven't been playing that long, which is why I call the channel Noob Report. But one of the first pieces of advice that one of my local shop owners gave me, I support my local shops, they've been wonderful. He told me, you're going to encounter a lot of blue, it's an extremely popular color, and having the ability to pay 1 red to just completely shut off somebody's commander as they're casting it. They're paying maybe 4 or 5, for example, and you're just paying 1 and pushing it back. That's great. Countering counters, the cards really put in work. Another great option that I don't think is very popular, Fire Covenant. It requires a colorless, a black, and a red. Fire Covenant deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is equal to the amount of life you pay. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. Excellent. I mean, ideally, it'd be after you've been putting in work with Sarah Ascendant all game, because then you're already way above the 40 mark. But once again, being in multiplayer and starting out at 40, this is potentially a one-sided wrath. It's very powerful. To pay 3 mana and then as much life as you want to single-handedly deal with any issues on board that you can't with your other targeted removal, it's very powerful. I highly suggest it. Before I recorded the video, I wasn't sure if you could get this through Sunforger, but I found the ruling and you can. It is definitely an amazing investment. Investment. I said it right the first time. So now we're going to talk about the 3 charms that you can pull out of Sunforger for this deck. Naturally, you can run, I think like 16 or 18 charms, like there are options, but these 3, I think, really focus on the spirit of what we're trying to do with this deck. So let's get into it. And just so you know, each one stays true to its namesake, for those of you who may not know their effects. So the Absent one, for example, wants Absent colors. Naya needs Naya colors, and so on and so forth. So, Absent charm. You choose one of these 3 effects. Exile target creature with power 3 or greater. Not bad. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Okay. Distribute 2 +1/+1 counters amongst 1 or 2 creatures. I haven't had to do that maybe once or twice, but you have the option, and that's the main takeaway. Naya charm. Naya charm deals 3 damage to target creature. Return target card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. Tap all creatures target player controls. So, graveyard recursion is powerful already, like in its own respect. But this last effect of tap all creatures target player controls, from my experience of playing Saskia for so long, even before I was dabbling with Helm of the Host, it's game ending. You have to imagine, when you're attacking player A, for this example, with all of your creatures and putting lethal on board, if you tap out all of player A's creatures and Saskia's effect is targeting player B, you've effectively killed both of them. No matter what's on their board, it doesn't matter. Even if they have enough creatures or even pillow forts, you're circumventing all of that foolishness. And always, even if there's like a random person at the table who you can't seem to get to for those reasons, you can focus on the person who you can get to and target this tricky person and take them out. Helm of the Host just makes it sweeter, because then the Saskia copy also hits this player C over here. It's very effective. And adversely, it has saved me a few games. Think about it. So let's say you have another aggro player at the table, or somebody who went through combat just like you. When they're preparing to attack you, and mind you, you will be hated off the table if you sit down with Saskia. The first tournament I ever did at my local shop, they told me, when I put Saskia right there, they said, oh, okay, we're gonna get him out. And they're running like storm decks. It's gonna happen, trust me. People want to play Magic and they don't want dumb beaters coming at them. But the difference is with this card, when people who are like you try to get you off the table because they know how aggressive you are, you can at instant speed, even through Sunforger, which is funny, but you can at instant speed just go ahead and boom, tap all their creatures. And 2 things have happened. You've saved yourself, yay, but also they've exhausted their attack. They're all tapped out. And so when your turn comes around, instant retribution. Make them pay, make them suffer. It's really effective. Before I talk about the last charm, in fact, I want to talk about another version of this type of effect. It's actually one of those split cards. I doubt you'd be able to see it like that, but I'll put it up here or over here, however I decide to edit it. So it's called Order and Chaos. It's another fuse ability. Exile target attacking creature, which I don't care about. I don't think I've ever done that. Maybe once, who knows? But this, creatures can't block this turn. Instant speed. Oh, beautiful. I've won games with this. Just nobody can block. And then you're left to your own devices and just round the game out. So for that last charm, Boros Charm, let's talk about those 3 options that you have. Boros Charm deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. Permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. That 3rd ability, I had no interest in it. I've never used it. However, it's an option and it's there. But let's talk about these other two abilities. So, dealing 4 damage to a target player or planeswalker, the 2018 decks have released new planeswalkers into the game. So, chances are your pod may have 1 or 2 people playing planeswalkers again. They may come back just because of that. And just dealing 4 to 1 is just really useful, especially coming out of a Sunforger, just unexpectedly. But the part I really care about is making all your stuff indestructible, especially at instant speed like this. Having an aggro-based creature style-esque deck means we die hard to board wipes. You ask anybody who's been playing the game longer than us, and they will tell you. And for the veteran players who are watching this, I'm sure you would agree. These decks just die hard to board wipes. By having a way to make everything indestructible, it can mean game. You don't want to build up this strong army and then all of a sudden just lose all your pieces, because they will kill you. It's a great option. In fact, let's stay there for a second. Teferi's Protection is another great way to make sure that you don't die to board wipes and it's deeper than board wipes. Teferi's Protection, which I'll read the effect first, it's 2 and a white, instant. Until your next turn, your life total doesn't change. You have protection from everything, all your permanents phase out, and then it exiles after it's been cast, which is fair for this level of power. But it not only stops you from dying to board wipes, it stops you from losing the game. Depending on what's happening at the table, you can pull out, phase out everything, let the chaos happen, and then phase right back in, and then take game. Great card. I didn't have to pay for it as a single, thank goodness, because around the time it came out, it was in the 20s. And I picked it up out of when I bought the Edgar 2017 deck. Thank God I did. It's an amazing card. I consider it to be a staple, especially in these type of decks. I also put Silence here. Silence costs 1 white. It's an instant that says your opponents can't cast spells this turn. Now keep in mind, to be honest, if you have somebody who's comboing off, chances are they held up a couple of counters to stop foolishness like this. But you have an answer. You're not just sitting there. Maybe they don't have a counter. Who knows? If someone starts comboing off to win the game, you do Silence, you can stop them. And it gives you a chance to come around and just kill them. Further, if you're on your turn and you're prepared to bring the game to a close, you can just do Silence, and that's it. You're able to just play in your safe space, in your sandbox of their carnage and bones and flesh and misery, and bring it to a close. Why not? Further, there's actually an equipment, the third one we'll talk about, called Conqueror's Flail. In fact, let me pause on that. For that Sunforger package that we just did, keep in mind, those cards are not just good because of Sunforger. No. These are cards, if you notice, that would be advantageous to just have in your hand. You would be in a great place, whether they're coming through Sunforger or just coming out of your hand. They're very powerful effects that remedy some of the issues that our decks face, like being able to answer to blue through the counters that we discussed, being able to make your pieces indestructible or, you know, able to survive. Great options. So Conqueror's Flail. It's a 2-drop and it costs 2 to equip. Its effect is equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. As long as it's attached to a creature, your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. It's excellent. You run a 4-color deck. If you put this onto Saskia, for example, he's getting a +4/+4, and he's telling your opponents, you can't counter when I try to kill you this turn. You can't put out any type of foolishness. Just stop playing. Just surrender to, just catch this L, just catch this fade. Like, that's what that card is. I love effects like this in our deck, especially since we're playing against blue. I also say that this deck should certainly run Seaborn Muse. It seems like a random detour, but I'll explain why in a minute. So it's 3 colorless, green, green. Untap all permanents you control during each other's untap step. So you now have the power to, kind of like pseudo-vigilance, swing out. Every single, as long as this is up, swing out. Then after you've done that, on each other player's turn, you're not left without blockers. You can still answer if someone tries to do something to you because you have blockers, but more importantly, This deck runs a lot of instants in that Sunforger package, maybe about 13 I think it was. Now, you aren't just beholden to doing a Sunforger cute thing on your turn and, you know, to a limit. Seaborn Muse refreshes your mana pool so that you can answer many different threats before your turn rolls back around. It is an effective way to control the board and have the mana to do so. I certainly recommend running it in this deck. Now, there are two equipments I want to talk about that are called, I guess they're called like transforming equipments, where they start off as artifact equipments, but then they flip into something else. The first one's called Dowsing Dagger. It does cost 2 to cast. It's an artifact equipment that says when Dowsing Dagger enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2/0/2 green plant creature tokens with the defender. The equipped creature gets +2/+1, which is okay. But this is the getcha gotcha. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you transform Dowsing Dagger into a land that says tap for 3 mana of any color. Excellent. I don't even have to explain why that's good. Elbrus, the Binding Blade, is the second one I want to talk about. Now, it costs 7 to cast. Stay with me. Don't turn the video off yet. Stay with me. It's a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0. Yes, I know. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. When equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, unattach Elbrus the Binding Blade and transform it into Withengar Unbound. So it's a black legendary creature demon with flying, intimidate, and trample. And whenever a player loses the game, put 13 +1/+1 counters on Withengar Unbound, and it starts off at 13/13. So pre-Helm of the Host, with this little fellow on the board, you're swinging and killing player A and player B in the scenario that we discussed the first time around. He all of a sudden gets all of these freaking counters, so that the issue that we've talked about in the past, where you empower this other person to win who's not being targeted if Helm hasn't been drawn or something, they have this to deal with. And it has Intimidate, and it's in the air. I would pay 8 mana, you know, the 7 for casting, the 1 for equipping, for a 13/13 flyer, a 26/26 flyer, and a 39/39 flyer. That's game. I would absolutely do that. Now, and I want to pause here for a second, because keep in mind, life happens. We're going to run a lot of tutors. We haven't gotten to all of them quite yet, and you've already heard some of the ones we do run. Stuff happens. Helm of the Host, maybe you didn't draw it, maybe you didn't tutor it out. So you want to think about how you can optimize your creature base in those scenarios. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Now, to another equipment. It's not a transforming one, but it is one of the Sword of equipments. It's called Sword of Light and Shadow. It costs 3 to cast, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from white and from black. First, I want to pause there. That is awesome. A lot of the, actually, no, not all of them. The majority of the popular board wipes that are in this game are either white or black, or like they have it in their identity in some shape, way, form, or fashion. Even when you look at the targeted removal in our own deck, there's just so much white and black there. So this is a really evil way to make something super powerful. And then to make matters worse, whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you gain 3 life, and you may return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Absolutely. Those creatures that have been putting in work and somehow they died, they got your Seaborn Muse off the field, man. Bring them back. Excellent. The next equipment I want to talk about is Argentum Armor. It costs 6 to cast, 6 to equip. Equipped creature gets +6/+6. Seeing a trend here with these 6s. Whenever equipped creature attacks, destroy target permanent. This is a very mana-intensive card, but I love it. I think it's worth it. If you get it onto the right creature, you can just swing out and just remove any target permanent, planeswalkers, lands included, everything. You can also run, keep in mind that when you want to run things like Elbrus the Binding Blade and Argentum Armor, you could put something in like a Mirari's Wake if you wanted to, where if you're tapping land, and it's not in my deck, but you know, you can tap lands and push up 2 mana per. There are creative ways that you can deal with some of this stuff. Okay? Now I want to talk about Masterwork of Ingenuity. It's a 1 to cast, it's an artifact equipment that essentially comes into the battlefield as a copy of another target equipment. Great, so any of the ones we've discussed, or any of the ones that you want to add that fit your playstyle more, you get to copy it. I'm on board for that. Now, this is usually the part where I would talk about Lightning Greaves. However, I think for this particular deck, Swiftfoot Boots is better. It's 2 to cast, 1 to equip instead of 0, unfortunately. But now that your creature has hexproof as opposed to Shroud, and also haste, but you now are empowered to, if it comes down to it, equip other equipments onto the creature that has the boots attached. It's just a small difference, but I think it's worth considering based on the style of this deck and how many equipments you do run. Now I want to do some color focuses. I want to just focus on black for a second. Black is a tertiary color in this deck. You don't have a lot of it, so we're going to just utilize it for its draw power. The other colors I don't think give you as much for what you'd be paying. So let's start with just Night's Whisper, 1 and a black, draw 2, lose 2 life. Black sorcery, nice. Read the Bones, 2 and a black, sorcery, scry 2, draw 2, lose 2. Clean, effective. Read the Bones. Oh, I just said that one, sorry. Painful Truths, 2 and a black as well. But the difference with this sorcery is it has Converge. You draw X cards, lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast it. So we're in a 4-color deck. I don't think it'd be hard to achieve a 3-color cast, draw 3 at the cost of 3 life, and you only pay 3 mana. Perfect. But at the top of this list, the enchantment that I referred to earlier, Necropotence. It's 3 black, and you know, you skip your draw step, and in the event that you end up discarding for any reason, it does get exiled, so keep that in mind. You put these cards face down and then add them to your hand afterwards. So, Necropotence is a staple in this deck and a win condition. You are running a lot of instants, like I said. You're running aggro, so you're exhausting a lot of resources. Not just fighting, but staying alive. And you're trying to take down a lot of opponents through the means of battle, which when you do the math, you know, 40, 80, 120. You're going to need to replenish those, you know, that armory as much as you humanly can. Necropotence is certainly a win condition if you can do that. And if you are like me, I do run like Thought Vessel and Reliquary Tower, which increase your hand size. Now it's up to you, because if someone hits that card, obviously, then you'd have to discard down, and that can be detrimental. So just talking options. If you're still sticking with black for your culling needs, you can also consider the black tutors. Now, there is really, you know, there's a plethora of options, but I've been very budget conscious for the most part with my builds. But I'd say for these black tutors, just break the bank. They're about 40 each, but they're totally worth it. Vampiric Tutor, which is 1 black instant. Search your library for a card, shuffle up, put it on top. 2 life, boom. Demonic Tutor, what you grab comes to your hand. I don't really think that there's any reason not to run these cards in this color identity, because you can grab any equipment you want, any creature you want, any answer that you need. These cards are perfect. They're game changing. So we've talked about black. Now I want to also talk about another color, green, which is going to help you ramp up the mana, because this is a mana intensive deck. So obviously there's a couple of staples that I'll talk about, like Rampant Growth. You basically ramp out 1 basic land card. Cultivate does 2. 1 comes in tap, 1 comes to your hand. And Explosive Vegetation, which does 2, both coming out to the field tapped. You can also do Farseek, which it doesn't say that it has to be a basic land, so you can grab like dual lands that have, because there are certain dual lands that are both forests and plains, for example. You can grab stuff like that with Farseek. Very effective. Further though, Mana Dorks. Like I expressed earlier about these creature-based tutors that are creatures themselves, you are giving yourself bodies Bodies that not only can be a part of the battle, but can float up mana. So I'm going to just talk about a couple of examples of excellent mana dorks. Birds of Paradise is obviously a staple, having that ability to push up anything. Llanowar Elves represents all of the one-drop elves that you can turn sideways for green, which are very effective. But you also have color-fixing mana dorks, such as Avacyn's Pilgrim and the Elves of Deep Shadow. The Pilgrim pushes up white, and he's a 1/1. And you have Elves of Deep Shadow, which is also a 1/1 that pushes up black. Yes, it costs you one life in order to do so, but it's color fixing at the end of the day. It's really, really effective. And also, there's a saucy tech that I really love to use. He does cost 2 to cast, a red and a green, and when you turn him sideways, you're only getting green out of him. But his name is Zertal Druid. Whenever you tap Zertal Druid for mana, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Oh, glorious. Like, glorious. It's really saucy to just ping everyone simultaneously, especially if you're going to be using your mana dorks often. Like, that damage adds up. Now, all of these mana dorks mean what? You're running a high octane of creatures. So there's one draw card in green that I think is worth your time. It's called Shamanic Revelation. You draw a card for each creature you control. The mana cost for the card is 3 colorless and 2 green, but that's a nice return on investment. Further, you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So it's definitely worth it. You also get to run Growing Rites of Tillamook. Now, for people who have a higher budget, Gaia's Cradle is pretty much what this is. It starts off as a 3-drop enchantment, 2 of that being colorless, 1 being green. When Growing Rites of Tillamook enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rites of Tillamook. And as I said on the back, Tillamook, Cradle of the Sun, is essentially Gaia's Cradle in that it can push up 1 green or it can give you green for each creature you control. I absolutely recommend running this in any deck that runs a bunch of mana dorks, but just any creature-based deck. It's really effective. And since, like I said, I keep repeating myself, you have such a mana-intensive requirement, it's a good idea to sneak in something like that. So now, that is pretty much the core or the crux of what the main strategy wants out of you. But let's now talk about some of the really cool creatures that can really hold your opponent at bay and really throw a wrench at their plan. For each creature, it's going to be a different reason. So let's just start at the top with Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. And give me a second, please. I need some coffee. All right, cool. 4 colorless, 1 red, and 2 white. For a 5/5 angel with flying and first strike, if a source would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. When I first started playing, I got tricked by some of the damage doublers in this game. All of them are not like Gisela. You have to be very careful. Some of them double all damage, even damage that you're taking. And trust me, you're going to get hated off the table. The last thing you need is for everything that's hitting you to be doubled up. You don't want that. She specifically targets the opponents. Well, she doesn't target them, but she dishes out the carnage to them only. Further, if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, you prevent half of that damage rounded up. So she's also cutting some of the damage that you would take when you're being hated off the table. Sign me up. I also think the Audric Lunarch Marshal is an exceptional choice for this deck. It costs 3 and a white. It's a legendary human soldier. At the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until the end of the turn. If a creature you control has first strike, but the same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. Wow. So any creatures that you choose to run, because I'm not going to go through all the creatures that I run, and I really leave it up to you to figure out what you like, but even from the ones we've discussed, Aurelia being on top of this list, all of a sudden, all your creatures are in the air, and have vigilance and have haste, sign me up. If you run a creature that has indestructible, absolutely. The ability sharing is very great. I don't really know what else to say. Now let's talk about another option that is just exceptional, especially if you get Helm with the Host on it. It's called Iona, Shield of Emeria. For 6 and 3 whites, it is an angel flying, so it's also up in the air. As Iona, Shield of Emeria enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of that chosen color, and it's a 7/7. So when I first looked at Iona, my initial thought was to just call blue, because I have a lot of blue hatred in my red heart. However, it's your opponents in general. So this is a card that you don't necessarily have to swap out if you're not in a blue predominant pod. If the common color that they all have is black, for example, you're not fazed by that. It says what the colors they run. And if you get Helm of the Host on her and propagate copies, you can slowly shut them out from being able to cast anything. This isn't an effective strategy. I've never pulled it off, but it is an option, and it can be deadly, obviously. Another creature I want to talk about is Elish Norn, Grand Cenobite, 5 and 2 whites. Notice some of these creatures are, mana intensive, but they have a huge return on investment if we're going to pay all of this. It's a Praetor with Vigilance. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Other creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. In some cases, especially because mana dorks are pretty popular in elves and token-based decks, like all of these fall to Elish Norn. And if you're really hateful and spiteful, you can do Helm of the Host on this. And then, obviously, it just makes it damn near impossible to cast anything in front of you. And then all your creatures are just high on power. Sign me up. Now, the next card I want to talk about is Grand Abolisher. 2 whites, Human Cleric, 2/2. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Yes, 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 and yes. That has showed up in every deck that runs white for me, despite the build. It is an amazing card. It really, especially when you don't run blue, you appreciate not being countered when you're trying to stay alive, but further just in the game. Because counterspell being just 2 blues, it's powerful enough to just stop your whole strategy and just strip it apart. Great. Vexen Shusher, which you can pay either, so it's basically each mana symbol is either red or green. So you can pay 2 green, 2 red, or any permutation, truly. It can't be countered as it's being cast. It's a Goblin Shaman 2/2. Target spell can't be countered by spells or ability, and you have to pay red or green to make that happen. Protect your mana investments. You're paying a lot of mana for the things that you're casting. And this card is a very effective way to just stop your stuff from being countered. Now, it does not stop someone from like doing a targeted removal or something like this, but it's still a great choice. The next one we're going to talk about, let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Okay, good, we're on good track. Is Eternal Witness. For 2 green and a 1, she comes in and she just returns any permanent, well, not any permanent, sorry, any card from your graveyard to your hand. Reuse some of that hatred, use Fire Covenant again, they didn't get enough of it. Bring back Sarah Ascendant. I mean, the list goes on and on. If they did hit your Helm of the Host, go ahead and bring it back. Why not? We're in the proper colors. The next creature I want to talk about is Hydra Omnivore. 2 green and then 4. When Hydra Omnivore deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. So I don't really have to explain why this is good in a deck like this. You're hitting all your opponents at one time. Even if Saskia is not there. I mean, that's just even more carnage, so sign me up. I love carnage. But 8 to everybody, or then if you get, let's say that Conqueror's Flow on this thing, you're dealing out more than 10 damage, like that's more than a quarter of what our starting life is, just simultaneously. It's a great option. It was reprinted recently in the 2018 deck, so I would definitely say pick one up. Okay, so next on our list, we're just going to talk about 2 pieces of targeted removal that are great options. They don't necessarily, because there's so many options in our color identity for targeted removal, but I really think you should run these 2. The first one's Vindicate. It costs 1, a white, and a black. And it just simply says, it's a sorcery that simply says, destroy target permanent. Excellent. Beast Within is very similar in that it's 2 and a green, so you can't, although it's an instant, you can't pull it through Sunforge or anything, but you destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green beast creature token. But it's any permanent, so I'd be willing to give you a 3/3 beast if I'm taking out your Guy's Cradle, or if I'm taking out a game-winning piece that you need, like your Paradox Engine, your Aetherflux Reservoir. Absolutely. Honestly, you should exile those things. So if you have Utter End, or you should probably exile those things, but who knows? If you don't have anything else and they're about to combo off and kill you, do so at instant speed, okay? Now let's talk about a card that I think every multicolored deck should run for color fixing. It's a Chromatic Lantern. It's a 3-drop artifact. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Further, it's a stone, so it pushes up its own mana. I think it's a staple in any deck with this range of color options. As for Planeswalkers, you have a lot of creatures, and your Seaborn Muse is refreshing everything every turn. You're in heaven. So that means that you have a lot of blockers for your Planeswalkers. You can run, Elspeth, you can run Xenagos. There are so many great options. However, I really want to leave that up to you. The only one I would absolutely recommend is Domri Raid. It's not super popular. It's a 1, a red, and a green. It starts with a 3 loyalty. The +1/+1 is looking at the top part of your library, and if it's a creature card, reveal it and put it in your hand. Clean. I like it. It's a creature-based deck. For -2, target creature you control fights another target creature. Kind of like Alden Well Tracker, it's targeted removal in a deck like ours, where our creatures are so powerful. Just because a creature doesn't have a lot of power or toughness, for your opponents rather, or even yourself, it doesn't mean that it's not a threat. You can have something that has very little power or toughness that is a real threat. It's providing some type of, pillow fort or some type of like sacrificial element that you can't get around. Make it fight something like a Gisela, and then you're back in the game, or Elish Norn. It's targeted removal. It's really clean. Last but not least, the emblem that you can get if you ult with this, which is -7. Creatures you control have double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. I don't have to explain that. And keep in mind, these emblems don't go anywhere. Even if Domri Raid goes somewhere, that it's there. You earned it. And now your creatures are that much more difficult to deal with. I think it's a great idea. Now, the last part of this is, I'd like to call it alternative win conditions, because in EDH, and obviously if you're a veteran, then you know this, and maybe if you're new to the game, you don't. Yes, you want to focus on how you want to win. It's very important, but you also want, if you can, multiple ways to win. In aggro, swinging out and killing everybody is fine, but you want to think about the math, and you want to think about how you can optimize your playstyle. So let's go back to an original equation I said earlier, which is like 40, 80, 120. It's a lot of life to put on board when you really break it down. But with a card like the one we're about to discuss, instead of having to deal 120, you only have to deal 30. It is called Triumph for the Hordes. You pay 2 and 2 greens. Until the end of the turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. So now you can just poison all of those greedy little blue players to death. And what's really cool is with something like Saskia, and this is why Saskia Infect is a deck in and of itself. And if you want to see me doing a Saskia Infect build, please, say something in the comments below, and I'll do a video on that in the future. I've never done Infect, so it'll be kind of fun. I've killed with this, but not a whole deck on it. Saskia propagates that Infect. So now you have the power to kill player A by poisoning him to death. Let's say Unias charmed him, and now he's tapped out, and you killed him with 10 damage. Now you can kill player B with that same 10. Poison propagates through this. And if you have Helm of the Host out, the other person. Now, this isn't just resting on Helm of the Host, because in the reality of a pod, your Helm of the Host, which is your win condition, can get exiled. It happens. You can't be discouraged. You need other ways to win. And this is a great option. Another one. Disrupt Decorum. 2 and 2 red. It's a sorcery that says goad all creatures you don't control. This is absolutely an amazing option that also came out of the Edgar 2017 deck that I told you about earlier. By goading all of their creatures, a few things happen that work out for you. Now, let's go back to the presumption that we are hated off the table for the type of deck we're running. That's perfect, okay? For one turn now, and especially in the late game, this is really game-ending stuff. They can't touch you, but they are forced to touch each other. Despite all of the politics, there's going to be a bloodbath. I love the flavor on this card. Like, dinner and politics don't mix, just it's so true. Like, think about it. This person now has to swing out. This person has to swing out. This person has to swing out, but they can't touch you. And then, no matter who survives, by the time that it comes back around to you, they're all tapped out. So now, you have an option to attack because they don't have any blockers, for example, or their creatures have died as a result of all the battle. Excellent. The last one condition I want to bring up is very boring to me because it's, first of all, the first piece of it is super expensive, but also it just doesn't seem as creative to me, but we'll talk about it anyway. It's worth it. And I'm sure a lot of you noticed that I missed this equipment, but Sword of Feast and Famine. So it costs 3 to cast and 2 to equip. And for anyone who doesn't know the effect, I'm going to read it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from black and green, which is excellent. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and you untap all lands you control. Which, even without a win condition, that effect is great in this deck, especially with all the instants and just recycling lands in general. However, if you pair it with this next creature, which is Hellkite Charger, 4 red and a red, flying haste dragon, 5/5. Whenever Hellkite Charger attacks, you may pay 5 and 2 reds. If you do, untap all attacking creatures, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Then, obviously, with this interaction, you would just keep untapping lands and paying the cost and just going back and forth until you just end it. And it's up in the air and it's hasty, so it can just happen all of a sudden. You can't just spill these 2 onto the field and then just win the game. And because of the black tutors that we run and the equipment tutors that we run and all the tools that we've built for ourselves, it is not unlikely that something like this would happen. So it's, you know, it's there. It's definitely an option. And another thing I like about this combo is even if the pieces were broken up, I already told you the advantage to Sword and Feast and Famine, but Hellkite Charger, that's not bad. 5/5 hasty flying thing, you know, that's not bad. I'd be willing to run that even if my Sword of Feast and Famine got exiled. But more importantly, you're just giving yourself more outs in the event that you get hated off the board a little bit earlier, or if you've played against this pod a few times and they kind of know what type of antics you're up to, and they hit your Helm of the Host. So that's my deck tag. Overall, my closing thoughts on Saskia is it's such a fun deck. I've built recently a stack deck. I've built a lot of decks that kind of want to combo off as soon as possible, but nothing just brings me back to why I love EDH or Commander so much more than Saskia the Unyielding. It was my first deck, like I said, and it really has been changed completely by the print of Helm of the Host. And you know, like I said, this channel is called Noob Report because I'm still relatively new to the game and I don't really play super competitively. But I think that I can offer a lot of insight to people who are just starting and want to do things that are new and interesting. And I think that for people who've been playing a long time, maybe maybe you heard something tonight that will definitely spice up your pod. And oh, that sounds gross, but that will spice up your pod and make things different for you. So if you like the content, please, like the video, please share, subscribe, and let me know so that way I can make more content like this. Let's have some fun together. All right, so that was the Noob Report, and I'll see you next time.